Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. And we must add, the most prominent political commentator in Lions Bay, BC. Welcome to the show, Rafe.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Do you think that Christy Clark will run again as Liberal Premier of British Columbia when the election is called next year?
Oh, I think that if she has her druthers, she will. I suppose there's always the chance that she could be not deposed, but certainly eased out by her own party if things don't go well. But I don't think she intends to quit. There are a number of things that cannot go well. They're already not going well. Particularly with the LNG, and I think particularly stuff that we've done recently in the Common Sense Canadian and elsewhere has finally pointed out the horror story on BC Hydro, and she may have some problems that she doesn't have now. But the general question, I think, is, will she run? Well, I think she certainly will if she has her choice in the matter.
And is there really anybody else to vote for?
Well, there's certainly. I can't see any leaders in the Liberal Party is not loaded down with people you think of as leaders. I suppose maybe Mike de Jong might be considered a potential one, but by and large they're a pretty motley crew. And but what she's got going for her, and I did an article on this a couple of weeks ago, Jim, is that politics is a comparative thing. You can be a 3 in politics if everybody else is a 2. That's Mayor's axiom 1, incidentally, and that's very, very true. And as long as the NDP stay as ineffectual as they are now, and don't seem to have their act together, to put it mildly, yeah, she could win.
Who is the NDP leader, tongue in cheek?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. Horgan certainly stands out there as the leader, but when the NDP have been a political party for a long, long time. They haven't been an especially successful one over the years, but they've been a political party, and they know deep down in their gut that they're not doing the job. They know that, quite frankly, that I and others have been right, that the duty of the opposition is to oppose, not to go along with the government and try to be noble people and that sort of thing. It's to oppose, and they're not doing that, and they know that there's something wrong. Now, again, they have been through so much turmoil in that party over leadership over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know whether they've got the stomach for another fight. But if they don't either change Horgan or Horgan doesn't change, I think that they're giving Christy Clark quite an unexpected jump.
Well, it seems to me if you want to be successful in BC politics, it doesn't help if it does help if you've been mayor of Vancouver.
Well, it helps if you've been something. And, I don't know that you have to be mayor of Vancouver. I go back to premiers that weren't, and some of the mayors of Vancouver and other places that did become premier didn't turn out to be all that successful. But you have to have some sort of a track record or leadership. Now, I did a little blurb with somebody the other day on the question of leadership. Now, this is something that it happens. You don't know how it happens, but it does. For over the years, you've seen this, Jim. People said, "Oh, we're going to start a new political party. We've got this, we've got that. We'll run with it." Unless somebody shows up that really can take that idea and run with it and be a leader and command respect, it doesn't get off the ground. And that's the same as if a party is already established. You have to have somebody that really commands respect from the people that he or she leads. And the NDP have not had that kind of a person for some time, and I don't think they have it now. And I think that's the biggest thing that Christy Clark's got going for her right now.
Well, you have to be some kind of a likable personality, I think, where if you walk into a room, people automatically look at you. Right now, anybody from the NDP walks in, I don't know who they are.
Well, I think you can also be like Bill Bennett was. I don't think he was loved particularly, but respected. And when he walked into a room, people saw him, knew who he was, knew he was the premier, wanted to meet him because they knew he was somebody that did command respect of his colleagues. But, you're right. You can't be just sort of a nobody. I guess the best example of that over the last few years was poor old Bob Skelly, one of the nicest guys I've ever known. But, Bob would never have been recognized by anybody walking in a room. And he didn't have that quality. I hate the word charisma, but I suppose it has a place. He just didn't have that attraction. But neither was anybody else when you think about it. Very, very few have. Glenn Clark had it for a while, but he screwed up on the Ferries particularly. If he hadn't done that, he would have been around for a while because he did have some charisma and some sort of stature. But the rest of them haven't. And it's, as I say, this is a terrible thing to be going into an election without is somebody with stature.
Well, it's not like we don't have things to criticize the BC government for. What about them selling the ferry, the Queen of Chilliwack, for $1.6 million to Fiji when they just put $5 million worth of renovations into the ship?
Yeah, it was to an ex-employee too, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing is ridiculous. You see, the chickens are all coming home to roost, and this is what happens, Jim, when you don't have a media. You get away with murder for quite a while, and they've got away with BC Ferries, BC Rail, and BC Hydro, because the Vancouver Sun and the Vancouver Province simply haven't been paying any attention to it. They're on the side of the government. But now the stories are coming out, and people are starting to look and say, wait a minute, we've lost these things. How did that happen? Where was everybody? And when the lights went out? And, nobody knows where they were. We do know this. As you say, BC Ferries is an absolute disgrace. It would be laughable if it wasn't so disgraceful. We've lost BC Rail. We gave it away. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, people should be in jail for that one. And now people don't quite realize it yet, Jim, but I'm here to tell you, we have lost BC Hydro. They are technically bankrupt.
Well, really, a $9 billion project with the Site C Dam at a time when the demand for electricity in BC has been falling over the last 5 years.
Well, you see, this has always been BC Hydro's method. They've always predicted that they need more power than they do. And that's because you think of it, they're a hydroelectric company. They don't think about other sources of power. They're sort of like the workman that's got a hammer. Everything he sees looks like a nail, and that's all that they can see. So they don't understand why we're all upset about Site C. The Site C is a hydroelectric dam. That's a BC Hydro bills. So what are we all squawking about? But the fact of the matter is, it's a catastrophe. It's not as if BC Hydro didn't have enough problems with the IPPs, the independent power producers, bankrupting them in every way. They've now got this Site C to face, and it's got no future that we can be happy with.
And of course, now we've had court rulings saying that the Aboriginals were not adequately consulted about the pipeline projects. They have to go back to ground zero. By the time they get any pipeline in the ground, if they ever do, we've lost that market 2 years ago.
Well, I think the pipeline situation is going to be interesting to watch because Mr. Trudeau wants to have a pipeline. What I don't think has happened here, Jim, I don't think people in the rest of Canada, and particularly in Alberta, but the rest of Canada, quite understand what British Columbians feel about pipelines and why they do. It's not as if we're silly old buggers that just don't want to have any commerce in our midst. We are so proud of our environment, of our mountains, our rivers, and so on. We just don't want to risk it, particularly, selfishly, if we don't need the product ourselves. So that's a problem. Now, there's one little thing that you may have noticed in the press, didn't get much play, is that China in the new trade agreement has insisted that a pipeline be built to the West Coast. So the fat's in the fire. It's going to be very interesting times for those who are around to debate the issues.
And Mr. Harper, when he was Prime Minister, passed a law that said the federal cabinet could overrule any environmental finding.
Well, they can do that. I don't know whether they can overrule the thousands of people that are going to protest, though. Now, we haven't seen that happen yet, but my sense of it is we're about to see it happen.
And I wonder, what about those people arrested during the Kinder Morgan protests in BC when it's found out that the land they were occupying and arrested for was actually not Kinder Morgan property or property that Kinder Morgan had access to?
Well, it's a good thing we have a little bit of sort of black humor come along to keep us amused. But Kinder Morgan, the protesters in that, what was it, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they won that. No question about that. The company said, oh, no, they didn't, and the government tried to say, oh, no, they didn't. But they did, and they're still winning it. And I give a lot of credit to the mayor of Burnaby, and other politicians who have had the guts to stay with that issue. The Kinder Morgan is in trouble, and they know they're in trouble, and it's because the people have stood up and said it's not going to happen. It isn't because the law courts have helped them, or the public has suddenly got the legislature to help them. No, the public has done it themselves. And I think we're going to see a hell of a lot more of it. We're seeing it now build up in the Peace River country, and I think we're going to see it build up elsewhere. People are now sort of grasping the fact that they can do something, and it's coming, I think.
Well, the BC government also said that pipeline companies did not meet their 5 conditions to allow their construction. 2 of the conditions being world-class spill prevention and world-class spill cleanup. And we've also had the fire department in Burnaby say if they go and build more storage tanks in Burnaby, the fire department here does not have the capacity to deal with a fire there.
I find it interesting, Jim, in this sense. Yes, I know that governments have got to establish standards. That's what they do. But one of the standards you'll notice is not, do the public want it? Does the public democratically want this? That's never been considered as something important, except the public. And you go to the people in the Burnaby area that have been protesting and so on. They're saying, never mind all the rest of this crap. This is our park, our school, these are our streets, etc. We don't want it. And that's something I think that the government has just not adequately assessed, and it's going to come back and bite them.
Well, in Burnaby, we know about how vulnerable pipelines are because a Kinder Morgan pipeline ruptured, sprayed literally barrels of oil a second over a several block area, wiped out 50 homes. It's now a park overlooking the refinery. But personally, we've seen the kind of damage oil can do. You can't say to somebody, that's just a theory. We've seen homes wiped out with it.
Well, I think one of the bamboozlings that's gone on, and that's not putting it very well, but we've been bamboozled, and I think slowly but surely we're coming to think about this. We've been bamboozled into thinking that we're dealing with some risks here. We're not dealing with risks. I wish people would get that out of their mind. We're dealing with certainties. These are absolute, just like tossing a coin. You can say, oh, well, if I toss it maybe 25 times, it'll come up heads every time. Well, it might, but not bloody well likely. Sooner or later, it's going to come up tails. And that's the same. It's a matter of probabilities. And sooner or later, you're going to have tankers hit things. You're going to have spills. You're going to have ruptured pipelines and so on. They're going to happen. Now, I go back to the Enbridge line, which, of course, is having its troubles, too. But back a couple of years ago, I think you and I talked about this. Here we're saying, oh, well, yeah, but Enbridge is going to, they say they're going to have a good safety record. Well, if what happened in Kalamazoo happened in the Rocky Mountain Trench, can you imagine the damage to our country? And this is going to happen. I mean, you can't say, oh, well, we're going to make very, very sure it won't happen, and we've got a great safety record. That is just nonsense. Safety records are statistics. Spills are realities.
I remember, it wasn't too many years ago, a supertanker collided with the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Why not the Lions Gate Bridge in Vancouver?
Oh, it's all sorts of things to collide with. There's no shortage. I don't know whether you read the publication G Captain. It comes out, I think, every day except one a week. And it lists what's going on in the world of shipping and who's building what and what contracts, et cetera. But it also tells who's hitting things. And you'll be absolutely astonished at how many of these large freighters are hitting things. Now, if you listen to people like Captain Stephen Brown, the shill for the shipping company, they'll say, oh, well, no, there has not been an LNG accident for 75 years or something like that. What he's saying is there hasn't been one on the high seas. What he's not saying is there hasn't been one in coast waters and rivers and inlets and harbors and so on. And if Captain Brown were to take a look at what's happening in the Bosphorus or the Dardanelles or places like that, he would see that it's a common occurrence. Now, that's going to happen here. You can't avoid it, Jim. You know, I'm not being just a boo bird. I'm saying, you know, look at it statistically. It cannot be avoided. As long as you've got human error involved, you know, you're going to have these things happen, and it's just a matter of probabilities. And if you're prepared to face that and the catastrophes that come, all well and good. But we're being told there won't be any catastrophes, and that's just nonsense.
Well, look at the cruise ship Costa Concordia. It was a $500 million ship with the world's most modern navigation devices available, but it doesn't help if the captain decides to show off to a girlfriend and turn off all those collision avoidance
No,
devices.
It doesn't. And if somebody turns up a little the worse for wear, or just happens to make a mistake, misreads an instrument, whatever. I mean, this is human error, and it happens. You know, planes aren't supposed to crash, and they don't crash very often. When they do, it usually is from a very elementary human failure in the cockpit. And those things happen. You can't prevent them happening. And when they do happen, they're calamitous to the people that are on the plane and their families and so on and so forth. And that's the same probability that LNG tankers and other tankers carry with them when they sail in our harbors. And to be told that that's not true is, well, it's bullshit.
Well, I don't understand how a ship the size of a tugboat can clean up a spill from a supertanker until the super scooper bringing up that oil is the size of the ship that lost the oil. How can you recover it all?
Well, you can't, and particularly if you've got bitumen and oils like that involved. You know, I hate to laugh at these things because they're not funny. But last year there was one case in the Bosphorus, I think it was, where two of these huge tugs that were towing an LNG freighter, they broke loose and hit each other. So, you know, you can't tell, Jim. I mean, this is just human error like you and I and our families go through every day of the week. And when it happens, we don't like it, but we accept it as being part and parcel of life, and yet suddenly we don't want to believe it when it comes to something serious, and that's just silly.
Well, all the ads that the pipeline companies are running are saying all of our tankers will have a tugboat attached, yet Deltaport had its brand new causeway cut in half by a bulk carrier that was attached to a tugboat when it had an engine failure. That little tugboat could not stop the massive ship.
No, and this is what we have to understand and accept, and I don't think that anything that I've ever said on this subject, nor I'm sure you, is a question of blaming anybody. I'm not blaming the LNG people or saying that they're inefficient, etc. I think they're very, very efficient, and I know something about the freighters. They're marvels of engineering and that sort of thing. We all know that, but they're still subject to the same error that everything else is. You simply cannot build a foolproof tanker or plane or anything. Sooner or later, something's going to happen. Human error or something, it's going to happen. And when that happens with LNG, unfortunately, it's not just a little bump. It can be catastrophic, and we have to either accept that we're going to have huge problems in Howe Sound, the Fraser River, Vancouver Harbor, or we're not going to have any. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we're going to have the LNG tankers, but we're not going to have accidents. That doesn't equate.
And I was just thinking about, we talk about human error. What about Mother Nature? She's kind of a bitch, too. I mean, I'm just thinking about the tour ship in the northern tip of Vancouver Island that overturned when it was hit by a rogue wave and drowned several people.
Yep.
I hear, the Edmund Fitzgerald, they thought it was human error that sank that ship that was sung about.
And now it turns out.
Yeah, well, but it turns out that it was sunk by a super wave, a rogue wave. That can happen anywhere you have a ship out in the ocean or the Great Lakes.
Well, and you also have hurricanes in the most amazing places where you don't usually expect them to happen, and when they do, all hell breaks loose. I mean, this is the world. It's a dangerous world, and I honestly don't know, Jim, why we have to, talk about this. I mean, not you and me, but why the public have to talk about this so much to convince the people that are setting authority over us that we understand that these things are going to happen. Now, if you're going to be honest with us, say, okay, they're going to happen, folks, and it's going to be a calamity. We're going to have this, that, and the other thing, but we'll do our very best to clean it all up, and we want to make some money, so we're going to have to take those risks. Well, at least you face the thing in an honest way. I think 99% of us would say go to hell. but at least you're facing the real issue. But to turn around and pretend to us that these things won't happen, can't happen, etc., is just awful. I mean, we'd put our kids in their rooms for a day if they started to do that. It's just I don't know how the hell we put up with it. It's been going on now for as long as this LNG issue's been going on, and that's too long.
Rafe, always fun talking to you.
Thanks very much, Jim. I'm sorry I have a little bit of a cold, a little bit of a phone problem today, but there we are.
Well, there's always something, as we just talked about.
That's right.
Okay, thanks a lot.
My pleasure, Jim. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC cabinet minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.